These are real Native Americans who lived in the Americas around 12,000 years ago, and now they are in a museum. These are also Americans, but they came from Europe just 300 years ago, and they had guns, lots of guns. So, is the United States really just about money, democracy, freedom, an obsession with talking bushes, a black mermaid, memes about the president, and guns? Well, those things do get talked about a lot, but they also have a pretty fascinating history. Let's take a look. During the last ice age, there was a land bridge connecting Asia and North America called the Bering Land Bridge. Ancient humans crossed it to expand their territory and search for food. Later, as the ice melted and sea levels rose, the bridge disappeared. So, these people ended up stuck in the Americas. They lived by hunting and gathering. I mean, everyone back then lived like that. But gathering wasn't very sustainable, and as for hunting, well, they ended up wiping out all the mammoths. Also, the weather got warmer, so humans started growing corn, sweet potatoes, and beans. It worked pretty well, so everyone switched to farming. Once they had food and shelter, they began building societies. Although it's not Rise of Kingdoms, this land had many famous civilizations. There was the Olmec civilization with those giant stone heads, and the Maya civilization with its iconic pyramids. And boom, they collapsed. The Aztec and Inca rose to power. And just like that, this guy showed up, bringing civilization and guns to teach those Indians. Well, at least that's what he thought. And because he thought so, all of Europe thought so too. And that's how we got India too. Before GTA 6, then they realized, wait, this isn't India. Yes, but who gives a blank? Free resources and labor. I mean, slaves. Let's go. And so, European countries began colonizing the Americas. Merchants and settlers poured in, trading goods, both movable and immovable. Movable, meaning things that could walk and work the fields, you know. There was something else they brought to the natives besides guns, new diseases from Europe like smallpox, the flu, and typhoid. Combined with their hard work, enforced via the ropes on their hips, the indigenous population kept shrinking. The colonizers found the late game tribes like the Aztecs and Incas super annoying, so boom, they went the way of the Maya. Oh no, we're short on labor. Boom! The transatlantic triangle trade was born. Europe brought goods like weapons, alcohol, and textiles to Africa in exchange for cheap labor from local chieftains. Sometimes they just brought guns and didn't bother trading anything at all. Then, the laborers were shipped from Africa to the Americas on boats drifting at sea for months. The journey was so brutal that 10 to 20% of them died along the way. After some ultra-fast training, the survivors were immediately sent to plantations and mines to work, a light beating every 3 days, a heavy one every 5. Working conditions were harsh, only slightly better than in Cambodia during harvest season with high wages. Now, the Americas had a new labor force to grow corn, tobacco, coffee, and to mine gold and silver. And the European bosses? They started sharing the spoils fairly with the workers. Everyone got a piece. Black folks got beaten, and white folks got rich. The religious climate in England was pretty bad at the time, so many people chose to make a pilgrimage to the Americas to seek God more freely. Or at least that's what I guess, and while they were at it, they went ahead and started some colonies too. Other groups of English settlers came to America to make money, which led to an increase in English migration to North America during the 17th century. 13 British colonies were established, the foundations of what would later become the United States. At this time, Europe was riding the wave of the Enlightenment trend, basically a movement toward more rational, free, and progressive thinking. Yeah, rationality and freedom made them rich later on, while that progressive thinking eventually gave us relationships on standby, friends with benefits, and turned OnlyFans into a platform even more powerful than old-school Yahoo. People in the colonies also started reading works by thinkers like John Locke and Adam Smith. They gradually developed ideas about freedom and democracy. Meanwhile, Britain was at war with France and managed to teach France who the real boss was. But in return, they ended up drowning in debt. So they started imposing heavy taxes on the 13 colonies, which seriously pissed off the locals. The colonists protested, but the mother country didn't care. And then, boom, the battles of Lexington and Concord broke out. The colonists were ready to go to war with their own mother. After kicking Mother out and gaining independence, the Americans realized they needed a constitution. So they created one, along with a Congress and several branches of government. The whole process took quite a bit of time. However, many people still weren't satisfied with the Constitution. So the US introduced amendments, basically updates and changes to improve or add to the original document. The country also needed a leader. So George Washington became the first president. He advised everyone not to form political parties. His term ended, and people immediately formed political parties. In France, Napoleon rose to power. Spain returned Louisiana to France, but France was short on money, so they sold it to the United States. Jefferson, who was the president at the time, decided to buy Louisiana. Many people called him a hypocrite because it contradicted his own views on limiting government power. Still, the U.S. got all of Louisiana for $15 million. On average, Americans paid just 4 cents per acre, an incredible bargain. The cotton gin was invented? Yeah, now we had machines, except for one thing, picking the cotton. So while it reduced the need for labor in one area, it increased the demand for slaves in another. Wow, this might be the earliest example of job shifting. Lose one, gain another. More and more Americans began criticizing slavery, alcohol, and inequality. As a result, the U.S. split into two sides, the South, which defended slavery, and the North, which opposed it. For a long time, political parties clashed, and tensions between states ran high. Meanwhile, Native Americans were pushed westward, but there wasn't much opportunity for them either, because Americans kept expanding west. The state of Kansas was founded. They were allowed to choose whether to become a free state or a slave state. Both pro-slavery and anti-slavery groups rushed in and ended up fighting each other. In the end, the anti-slavery side won, and Kansas became a free state. This period also saw the emergence of the Republican Party and the women's rights movement, though that part wasn't considered very important at the time. A slave went to court to demand recognition of his citizenship, arguing that his owner had died and he had lived in free states, so he should no longer be considered a slave. However, the court rejected his claim because he was black. Overall, this case divided the political landscape into two clear sides, black and white. White moves first. Abraham Lincoln was elected president. He strongly opposed slavery, which made the southern states hate him. When Lincoln moved to abolish slavery, the southern states seceded from the United States and formed the Confederate States of America. The Civil War broke out, but without Captain America. And Lincoln was assassinated. After reunifying the country, they bought Alaska from Russia at a super bargain price. Society developed for a while, but people grew dissatisfied with political corruption and other social issues. As a result, they started the populist and farmers' movements. Well, those movements failed, but they laid the foundation for what became known as the Progressive Movement, which brought about political, economic, and social reforms. One day, the United States suddenly realized they needed more territory, and they found a couple of places that looked pretty good. However, Spain was in control of Cuba at the time. Sensationalist American newspapers accused Spain of sinking a U.S. warship. This became the perfect excuse for the U.S. to declare war on Spain. As a result, they gained Hawaii and Cuba plus the Philippines as a bonus. President McKinley was a big fan of this, but he was assassinated soon after. And just like that, Cuba slipped out of America's hands. World War I broke out. The U.S. played it smart, sitting in the middle and selling weapons to both sides, since the war was an ocean away and nothing to be afraid of. Then Germany dragged the U.S. into the war. America gave Germany a taste of democracy, and Germany lost, having to pay a massive amount of reparations to the winning side. Thanks to that, the U.S. began to grow rapidly, until the stock market crashed, triggering the Great Depression. This crisis lasted an entire decade, not because it naturally ended after 10 years, but because 10 years later, World War II broke out and people got busy fighting again.